Marshall against the 4-color Ram deck of Lucas Twiste, and we'll send you down to that right now. And these opening hands, a great summary of what both of these decks are up to here. A bunch of a motley crew of creatures of Chris Marshall, and a bunch of different lands and Genesis Ultimatums and Omnaths here for Lucas Twiste.
Right, and this is really that sort of threat-heavy draw that Marshall needs to be able to have in the early stages of the game in order to capitalize on the fact that Marshall needs to close the door before Twiste can get on the battlefield, right?
And Chris Marshall had the turn 1 Thieves Guild Enforcer and crucially drew the Soaring Thought Thief on turn 2 to follow that up with. So this has developed into one of the best possible starts for the Dimir Rogues deck.
Yeah, just actually having a way to apply pressure early like this, attack, start pecking away at Twiste life total is the make or break for these archetypes.
We even have the Heartless Act to follow that up with to contain the Lotus Cobra that leads to the truly busted starts from this Ram deck. And Temple of Deceit now scrying us into a Mystical Dispute. So Chris Marshall looking fantastic in this game, even after just the first 3 turns.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a spot where we can see in Twiste's hand, Omnath is really the only thing that's going to be coming down the pipeline. And next turn, Marshall's going to get to play out a threat and hold up Mystical Dispute to tag the Omnath. This is horrifying if you are in Twiste's seat right now.
Yeah, Omnath may be 4 different colors. One of those is blue, and that's going to be a juicy Mystical Dispute target. And I think that's essentially going to be game over here for Lucas Twiste.
And look at how big that graveyard is. This Nighthawk Scavenger, no joke.
Yeah, this isn't a deck where you're starting out with something like a Goblin Guide or an Archpriest of Iona or these creatures which immediately have a high impact. You're kind of getting out your 1/1s and your 1/2s and stuff early, and then at some point you very quickly turn the corner and those things are now gigantic.
Ooh, but look at this. This is a spot where it looks like Marshall chose not to deploy that Nighthawk Scavenger just to be able to cast the, we'll say, the full retail Mystical Dispute.
What is that playing around, do you think?
I believe the biggest thing it can play around is something like Felidar Retreat, but I'm not seeing any copies of it in Lucas's deck list here.
And even if there were a Felidar Retreat, that's just fine, right? Like, you see those creatures with their animations hovering over the battlefield. Felidar Retreat not going to do a good job containing those.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a 3rd copy of Mystical Dispute drawn for Lucas Twiste, and that's a card which is very effective in Omnath Mirrors, very effective in this matchup, but not when your opponent already has this fearsome Air Force on the battlefield.
Right, Twiste needs to have 2 removal spells here to get Marshall out of the game.
And this is going to be a very quick game 1 going to Chris Marshall, really showing the ceiling on what this Dimir Rogues deck is capable of. And this is how you draw it up, right? You would think against the Ram deck trying to cast these expensive haymakers, cheap creatures and cheap counterspells is where you want to be. That's been a great recipe in the past.
Yeah, just having a way to basically tag the 1 or 2 early developmental spells, all while making sure that every turn that Twiste has their threat answered is also a turn that Twiste loses, say 5 life, 8 life, something in that range, is a way to make sure that Twiste never actually makes it onto the battlefield and dies with a pile of powerful cards in hand.
And so for both players, as we move into sideboarding, for Chris Marshall, his deck already has to be configured to beat Omnath. That is the matchup that you have to care about in this tournament. For Lucas Twiste, I don't know how much he's preparing for Dimir Rogues in his main deck. So what upgrades does he get to make in sideboarding here?
Most of what we're going to be seeing is likely shaving on some of the harder to resolve spells, like Genesis Ultimatum, and bringing in more cards that play, 1, well at instant speed, and 2, better at interacting on the battlefield.
We're seeing the book, Maze Mind Tome, which has gained a lot of attention as a great card against Sultai control, Dimir control, and also in these mirrors, especially if you're playing this more reactive game plan. Not so great against the Dimir Rogues deck, which is applying a lot of early pressure, and you're not going to have time to reach the end of that book. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen Elder Gargroth come into the deck for Lucas Twiste, which I guess easy to forget about the reach on that one, but that seems like the perfect way to stabilize against a deck full of flying attackers.
So normally it would be a really good card, but when the opponent has one, a pile of Heartless Act, and then also has the very scary Zareth-san the Trickster, there's a pretty high chance that your opponent can actually just end up stealing your copy of Elder Gargaroth, rather, if they've been able to, say, mill one of the copies of it with one of their pile of cards that actually just shoves a bunch of cards from your library into the graveyard.
And one dynamic I didn't expect to see yesterday was players actually moving towards Elder Gargaroth in the mirrors, where if both players have these conditional interactive cards that don't line up well against a Gargaroth, and also they're cutting some of their own top-end cards, sometimes you just play a Gargaroth and get them dead, and there's not much you can do about it. So it is interesting to see that recipe again. And you see Feldar Retreat, a card that we did mention for Lucas Twist in Game 1 as maybe not being effective in this matchup, given the stats on these opposing creatures.
And we see 2 copies of Mystical Dispute in Twist's hand here. Those could end up playing in a big, big way.
Yeah, Marshall once again has this fast start of Theoskin Enforcer into Soaring Thought Thief, but Mystical Dispute will take care of the Thief, and now that alleviates a lot of the pressure that Twist is facing down. He has a second Dispute for the second Thief, potentially. Also a Stormswrath in case this board does get out of control.
There's also a line where these Drown in the Locks that are in Marshall's hand really need some more cards in Twist's graveyard for them to be very effective against a deck where 4 is kind of the pivotal CMC.
Yeah, this deck is better at turning on Drown in the Lock than really any other deck it's seen play in Standard, but it is still somewhat conditional, and you do need those to line up effectively, which right now they don't yet. So Chris Marshall has a handful of cards, but none of them really do much at the moment.
Right, there's this spot where if Twist were to crack something like a Fabled Passage, that would put a 4th card in yard to allow these Drown in the Locks to kill or counter Omnath or even this Feldar Retreat, but both of those cards want you to save that Fabled Passage, so it's just not going to happen.
And so Lucas Twist now has a lot more room to dictate the pacing of this game here. Does get to stick that Feldar Retreat, and so now he can almost play like the aggro control deck, just getting onto the battlefield and then having the Mystical Dispute to stop Marshall getting back into it.
Yeah, what this Feldar Retreat is really doing is just representing inevitability. Marshall is not going to be able to out-resource that card, and unless Marshall can find something evasive, isn't going to be able to attack through it either.
Yeah, we're going to get to the point where Marshall is having to use individual cards just to swat away at those 2/2 cat tokens, which is not where you want to be.
No, that's just not a real game plan.
And so I'm curious here if Twist is going to deploy the Omnath first, try and get full value out of that Fabled Passage, or if we're going to use a passage to get that Mystical Dispute back up as well.
At this point, it basically comes down to if Twist wants to call Marshall's bluff here. And I feel like this is a pretty low-cost time to call that bluff when you've already established one of your threats.
Absolutely, and with how much Lucas Twist has going on, I think he's perfectly fine, even if the Omnath does meet a bitter end somehow. We've got the Escape to follow back up with, we've got the Feldar Retreat on the battlefield, so I don't think we're really all in on this one threat by any means. And there is the card you flagged up, Emma, Zareth-san the Trickster.
And this is just so awkward because you don't have a way to really get the Zareth trick in.
All right, we're coming in. And we're blocking with a 2/2 on the Theoskin Enforcer. So now something has to happen here if this is going to be more than just a chump attack. It looks like Agadeem's Awakening, getting back the Enforcer for free, and also the Thief.
But this puts a ton of cards in Twist's graveyard. I love this attack.
Yeah,
this is clever.
This is the double-edged sword of playing Rogue's deck with this mill sub-theme in Standard, where if one of those cards is an Uro, then that's even more pressure that Twist gets to apply here.
But because it wasn't, now these creatures just get bigger, and there's a real chance that Zareth-san is going to be connecting next turn.
There is. Luckily for Twist, there is a Stormswrath in reserve here. I feel like we would have held that Fabled Passage if we were expecting just to do that. We get to Escape to the Wild instead, though.
Right, this is the turn where, because Twist didn't have any more land drops, every turn you just want to make sure you are doing what you can to put more resources onto the battlefield, because presumably that all of your cards being so good at snowballing that sort of mana advantage means that the more you actually get to just put cards on the battlefield, the more then you will be able to make even more of them. It's almost like growing your Katamari ball.
Yeah, that Stormwrath is going to be effective for basically any phase of the game, so why not force Marshall to extend even further, which he has to do now, given how scary this opposing battlefield is looking here.
Right, it's not like Zerathon is surviving a Storm's Wrath.
Oh, it sure isn't. That 4/4, very convenient sizing if you're the Storm's Wrath gamer. And Marshall will get to pick, looks like Omnath. And the Omnath in the Dimir Rogue deck is much worse than Omnath in the 4-color Ram deck built to maximize it at full potential.
On the other hand, if it weren't for the Storm's Wrath, it is just a 4/4 that draws a card.
Right, and Marshall may be thinking that Drown of the Log gives him a useful form of protection here. As it happens, Lucas Twiste does have another mystical dispute to force through whatever spell he wants to resolve. And actually, if Twiste goes for Kenrith here...
Yeah, this might be the line where it's Kenrith, play land, counter everything, haste, shove.
So that's 9 power already, becomes 12, Kenrith will be up to 18, so yeah, we're forcing some blocks for sure. We might even get to work Lotus Cobra into that equation as well. Lots of options here for Twiste. Watching these Ram decks when they cast Escape to the Wilds, it reminds me of just like watching a game of Uno, where both players have everyone has a million cards in their hand, and you eventually have to divide them into 2 separate hands just to keep track of everything. And we just have cards flying back and forth between zones, and there's a lot going on. Easy to be overwhelmed.
All right,
so there is the Kenrith
on the table.
Mystical Dispute forces it through that Drown of the Log.
God, these creatures even get vigilance.
It's so disgusting.
And this is what's so scary about this 4-color ramp deck, is that it turns the corner so well while being defensive the entire time.
Yeah, Chris Marshall now down to 3 life. And unless Zalstan can connect again somehow, get back... I guess it could get back Kenrith at this point. But again, Kenrith in Dimir Rogues, a lot worse than Kenrith in a deck that has as much mana of any color as it likes and can use any of those modes.
Yeah, this is just a rough spot where a Heartless Hat can't even take out these cubs because they have counters on them.
So Drown of the Log, I guess, can take down 1 cub, but then you leave yourself open to whatever Lucas Twiste has left over. And this is the phase of the game where spells are bad news for Chris Marshall, and also lands are bad news for Chris Marshall too, thanks to Feather Retreat.
Okay, so let's think about this for a second. So this is actually trading for one of the lethal threats that Twiste has, which is not bad. Then we see Marshall's going to have the ability to just play out Nighthawk Scavenger and then also have a removal spell for a 4/4.
Okay. And yeah, that Scavenger has to be gigantic at this stage.
Oh, or there's this. Take some counters off the token, because when this Felidar retreats just getting to actually play, you know it's never going to be a true removal spell. I really like Marshall finding a way to get some value out of that card.
And Thought Thief maybe can jump in front as a trump blocker here if it comes to that as well.
Absolutely.
Get to still hold up Drown in the Log. But interestingly, Lotus Cobra alongside Spyfield Hatter, those can combine for this 1-2 punch that is also a lethal threat with Chris Marshall on 3 life. Lucas Twiste pondering his options there.
Yeah, it's so strange because each of these land drops is basically a modular spell or a module spell that is just going to either give you a 2/2 or even grow this 4/4 to a 5/5 if you think that's something that needs to happen.
Yeah, as soon as Felidar Retreat comes down, that decision tree grows. Maybe it's not exponentially, but you see what I'm saying. A lot more options and a lot more to think about here. We're just going to send in the 5/5 first. And there is Cobra.
And the 5/5 being able to cleanly block Zerath San. Sun is just so rough here.
And not just that, but if Chris is trying to turtle up behind 1 or 2 blockers, that Stormflash can clear everything away, leaving the 5/5 that can crunch on 3 for lethal. But Adrenaline Log will take down that 5/5.
Okay, Marshall at this point, just digging for a removal spell off the top.
This actually, though, like, we get to attack the Style Stand. I think Lotus Cobra just has to Chump Block, and then we get to play the Nighthawk Scavenger. So is Chris Marshall getting back into this?
Well, the Storm's Wrath that hasn't really been good until now is very good now.
Yeah, this is going to undo all of Chris Marshall's hard work. And then we get to play a 2/2 via Feather Retreat, which is threatening to become a lethal threat on the following turn. And are we just going to clone this with our Glasspool Mimic?
Oh, absolutely. If
you love
Marshall
to see
had
that.
a removal spell, they would have used it last turn.
Okay, I have 2 lethal threats in hand, and then still a bunch of Haymakers in my deck to put the game out of reach. And sure enough, Game 2 does go to Lucas Twiste. We'll go back to sideboarding here before Game 3 between Chris Marshall on Dimir Rogues and Lucas Twiste on 4-color ramp. And as Standard looks likely to change early next week, you will see the ramifications of that, I imagine, on Versus Live every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, with Corey Baumeister there, who we saw in our round 1 feature match against Ross Merriam, who hopefully we will get to see in a feature match. Unclear if that's, when the Players to Watch slide comes up, we'll see just how likely that may be. But you'll see the two of them do battle, exploring the new Standard format, and much more besides on Versus Live every week over at StarCityGames.com.
Hey, Russ was 1-0 last I checked, so I'm optimistic.
Okay. Yeah, Ross, when he was streaming his testing during the week, the stream title was Desperately Trying to Avoid Playing Omnath. And I don't know exactly what he ended up registering.
Gruul Adventures.
Oh, okay. He's in the Sandy Dog camp. All right.
That's a good camp to be in. Let's just be honest. Sandy Dog, an amazing player with an amazing amount of prestige. Just one of the de facto online grinders and names to know in the online Magic community. Ending up at the same spot as Brandon Burton has got to feel pretty okay.
We'll see how unplayable Russ thinks the Gruul Adventures deck is, see if he shares Brandon's judgment on that. The thing is, though, we have seen Brandon win with some scrappy, I'll call them, mono red decks in the past. I think back to there was a set roulette tournament where people were like flashing in balls by one turn 2, making 15 power, leaving behind, just doing all of these broken things. Sandy Dog showed up with just a awful looking mono red deck, and of course burned his way to the finals regardless. So good to be in Sandy Dog's corner, but don't count on replicating his success necessarily. Don't try this at home.
Also, good to be in Chris Marshall's corner. Look at the difference between being on the play, being on the draw. That's that 1-2 punch of Thieves Guild Enforcer into a 2-drop rogue that is just going to allow there to already be 6 cards in Lucas Twiste's graveyard, just right off the bat.
We see that ideal curve for Chris Marshall for the 3rd game in a row here. The Thief does bite the dust with Thundering Rebuke, but we do get to follow up with Agonizing Remorse here, getting more information, taking one of those defensive measures away from Lucas Twiste, and now a crucial 3rd land for Chris Marshall. Sadly, a Black Soul, so Brazen Borrower out of commission for the time being. But we do still get to attack.
Getting in as eagerly as it can.
Tetris Triome being cycled for Lucas Twiste, who picks up Maze Mind Tome, which a great card for either taking control of a longer game or smoothing out your draws in the short term if you're just looking to try and stabilize.
Right, that's a painful cycle as well because it grew Thieves Guild Enforcer to a 3/2.
Yeah, usually you don't really think twice about cycling a card, but it does actually have a significant cost in this matchup.
This is also a turn that Twiste really wants to answer that Thieves Guild Enforcer if possible, because this is the turn where next turn Zareth-san can actually get involved in this game if Marshall just rips that land.
This is an interesting turn for Twiste. He could either cast Storm's Wrath or play Rebuke and Maze Mind Tomb in the same turn, goes to the expensive sweeper instead, maybe expecting it to get countered, and now, if he draws another play, he gets to resolve the Rebuke, hopefully, and also follow up with another card.
Okay, so a negate off the top, though, does play to this tempo plan that Marshall's deck is just really trying to lean so far into.
So there's Uro. One of the cards keeping Dimir Rogues down in this format, if you ask many people. And there's Maze Mind Tome. We're not even going to try and resolve that Thundering Rebuke just yet. And here is just Petty Theft, bouncing back the tomb. We do get a scry from that on the way out. But that scry means very little in the face of Thieves Guild Enforcer.
Ooh, do we have something good for this Xerath to get?
I guess the Uro is a decent floor on that card. Oh, there's a Kenrith. That's a Colossopede.
Kenrith can also just use its reanimate ability.
Oh, it sure can. That's a mode that you never see out of the full color Ram deck, or very rarely, but Chris Marshall has enough Black Sources in his deck. That could certainly come into play.
And so many of Twist's removal spells deal 4. This Kenrith is horrifying on Twist's side of the battlefield right now. This game is slipping away.
Well, there's a 6/6. We did give that Uro enough fuel to escape with. And that makes me wonder if using that Petty Theft may have been premature. Oh, but there's Rankle. Okay. So that can fly over the Uro and connect and give Chris Marshall his choice of permutations for those modes. And Rankle can force Lucas to sacrifice the Uro. Chris will have to sacrifice, I won't say his own Kenrith, but the Kenrith he controls in the process, though. Or maybe Rankle itself bites the dust. Maybe it takes one for the team here.
Yeah, at this point, it's kind of like sacrificing Rankle.
Yeah, and Kenrith, if you find a 5th land, Kenrith just brings that Rankle back on the following turn.
Right.
But now there is a window for Escape to the Wilds to resolve for Lucas Twiste. Or maybe Uro can just come back again.
Oof, Uro immediately coming back is just so brutal. The fact that sacrificing the Kenrith put another card in Twist's graveyard may have just been a real liability for Marshall there.
That's just a cherry on top. There's Mazemind Tomb coming back for Lucas Twiste. Agadeem's Awakening, an interesting pickup for Marshall.
Not on 4 mana. Really gonna have to find something else to make that work.
Yeah, you already need a decent amount of other lands to make that Awakening good.
I guess the other side of things is casting it for 1 could have killed this Uro off with Rankle's Edict ability without losing the Rankle.
And Liliana Waker of the Dead, a theoretical answer to Uro, but not when it's already escaped 5 cards most of the time.
Does this actually kill Uro?
Wait, it just comes to our own graveyard, excuse me. So, yeah, Chris Marshall has a very stocked graveyard here. Gets to ping that down with Liliana and attacking with Rankle once again.
And the 3rd Escape to the Wilds comes off this Mazemind Tome to go ahead and just get a fresh grip of cards for Lucas Twiste.
And shields down once again. That negate is not active here.
And look at this, we have an Omnath in hand, 2 land drops for Twiste. Trying to figure out if the Omnath or just this Felidar Retreat's better from the looks of things.
Yeah, the Felidar Retreat in a longer game can create this steady stream of 2/2s that give you insurance against Rankle for your Omnath, for your Kenrith. Even for Uro, if that one comes back into the pipeline soon. So here's Omnath to start.
Oh, faithful.
Gonna gain 4 life, nice little buffer there against the Rankle. Escape to the Wilds gives us another land drop in this turn, so we trigger the 2nd landfall mode of Omnath, get 4 more mana, play a Felidar Retreat. You're seeing why this card, even after a week of legality in Zendikar Rising Standard, is already raising some eyebrows. And there's Thieves Guild Enforcer. Perhaps a little too late.
Well, it is going to trade for this Omnath, presumably.
Yeah, at this point, just any creature with without any text is still a fine pickup just to help Rankle keep pace in this game. But Rankle has a lot of work to do, and even if it's using a bunch of these different modes, there's just so much that Chris Marshall has to slog through here.
Oh, these Uros back online again?
So 2nd verse, same as the 1st. And so is the 3rd, and the 4th, and the 5th.
Quite the lyricist.
So if we were still keeping our Uro tally, which we abandoned long ago, it would be skyrocketing up in this game. And Chris Marshall helping that along the way, being very generous. And there's another Omnath being picked up for Lucas Twiste. I don't know if we can cast that one immediately.
Yeah, I think Lucas might have wanted to lead on the Cobra before the Omnath. I don't think it's going to meaningfully impact the game.
Either way, Lucas Twiste has everything he could possibly ask for on this battlefield right now.
And this is sort of the problem with these sort of tempo strategies right now, like these Dimir Rogues decks, is something like Felidar Retreat just completely turns off the card. Rankle, Uro negates a lot of the advantages that this tempo deck tries to snowball, either by reducing the number of cards in hand or getting paid for putting a bunch of cards in the opponent's graveyard. That's just an incredibly risky proposition at this point.
Yeah, if this 4-color Ram deck was an old school Ram deck where they're casting all of these Ram spells and then they have maybe 1 or 2 big payoffs, if you have a pile of negates and Drown of the Locks and so on to interact with those, maybe you can run them out of cards and maybe you can take control of the game that way. These Ram decks nowadays, and this was true of Sultai Ramp and Team Rek and so on, they just never run out of cards. They always have a stocked hand, a stocked graveyard, which is even more important when you have Uro in the mix, and just trading 1 for 1 always feels like a losing proposition.
I guess you have to attack with this Rankle.
And this is going to need to be a pretty good prank if Chris Marshall's going to stay in this game right now.
No abilities has been called.
So that's already 12 power on the battlefield. Uro gives us another land, which could be another trigger with Felidar Retreat. So that's at least 18. If we get to trigger Omnath a 3rd time, that's immediately lethal. So, and yeah, that's Escape to the Wild. So if we find any land off of this, and yeah, sure enough, double Fable Passage just to finish this one in style. Even have a second Felidar Retreat if we want to run up the score. We get 4 mana off Omnath, which lets us just cast that one for free, naturally. We sacrifice our Fable Passage. And do we have any more basics left? I don't think we have any more basics left to find. But I don't think we need.
Twiste will double check for us.
We're just okay with that. And there's 2 more retreat triggers, and that's going to be lethal damage. That's going to take Lucas Twiste to 2-0 in our Season 2 championship here over Chris Marshall, who falls to 1-1. But you have to think for Marshall, if you're choosing this